Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is, in fact, the Talamanca Review. Boy, that's really spiking. Huh. Okay. I guess it's because I got the microphone so close to me. It's Tuesday, the 18th of March at 7:18 p.m. And tonight I'm just going to do a walkabout. You know where that comes from, right? Walkabout. Everybody know that? Maybe I should just briefly go over that. What is a walkabout? Well, in the Aboriginal community in Australia, it's when a young man leaves the tribe and goes off on his own and just walks in the outback. And a walkabout, oh man, I mean they can go on for um, years, like years. Oh, come on now. What is going on with this thing? Yeah, they can go on for years. And it's, I guess, their version of a coming of age ritual. There's no real mission to a walkabout other than survive on your own in the outback, survive the solitude. And then they come back. And again, it's another one of that versions of Joe Campbell's heroic journey. And Joe Campbell was a 20th century mythologist and very interesting guy. You know, solitude is a very important part of life. Um, Now, the culture I moved into is not too big on solitude. Very, very gregarious people, the Latin culture. They love noise, they love voices, they love laughter, they love children. The more people in the room, the better. And I like that once in a while. Like I like when the grandkids are here. I like the love and presence of people. I do very much, especially young people, especially children. They're just so, precious. In my opinion, there's a tremendous benefit to being around children. And of course, the people working the other side of the street, precisely because the children are so pure and so innocent, they become the object of these dark practices. And very few people can cope with the intensity of that negativity. There's very few people who go into that world and survive emotionally and spiritually. We can talk about things. And when you talk about things, you're passing information. But the information that creates realizations is information that communicates with the heart. not the head. The head can discover things. It can follow things to their logical end through a sequencing. No great mystery there. I mean, you guys have heard me rhapsodize on the power of human intellect. I mean, compared to the animals around us, it's quite impressive. Compared to what's out there in the galaxy, it's junior kindergarten, you know. And if Cliff High is right, and I do believe he's right, okay, when he talks about his ontology, and he talks about the entirely different base of extraterrestrial science, it's a completely different foundation, you know. And you spend enough time turning rocks over, you can become a little bit jaded. I don't want to be a jaded person. I don't think that's a good status. I want to be open and loving. But at the same time, I don't want to avert my eyes. I won't avert my eyes anymore. Now, I'm not saying that this path is for everybody because it's extremely corrosive. You need a special constitution for it. It's a constitution that I possess. Part of it is innate and genetic, and part of it was conditioned by my upbringing, detailed quite eloquently in The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me. And it should be said that the books are an excellent companion to this podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, you'll love the books. I had occasion to communicate with a friend of mine who I came to realize, a friend of mine, listener of the show, he had kind of gone off on his own and read pretty much all of my books, the fiction and the nonfiction. And it's quite a sordid collection of books. I mean, one of them is a true crime story, one about a horrific murder in 1995 in Toronto. And just absolutely horrific femicide, the murder of a woman. They got the wrong guy. I wrote a book about it, but I wasn't able to change his fate. He finished his sentence. He's out now. He did 25 years, life with no parole. That's what it is in Canada. And that was an interesting experience. And what talking to my friend made me realize, and I articulated it in our conversation, I said, geez, I mean, my writing culminating in books like The Light of Darkness and The Devil in Us. When you follow my literary trajectory going right back to the early 2000s when my publishing started, it's all there, and I've been 100% consistent. And it's been an evolving dissertation on darkness. Even before I knew what I was writing. Even before it became crystal clear when I met Bob in 2020. It just has always been there. It's like that Simon and Garfunkel friend, hello darkness, my old friend. I've come to speak with you again. And I don't know, but I'll tell you, I think we're being massively lied to about darkness. And I think it's part of the religious control system. And I think that the truth of darkness would be very liberating for the human race, and I've done my utmost to articulate it. Understanding darkness also inoculates you against it. Now, an inoculation, I don't think it's the same thing as a vaccine. I said this on a podcast like a year ago, and some listener left a long comment on YouTube, explaining the semantics of a vaccine and an inoculation. But I always understood it to be that an inoculation was a little bit of the disease itself. Not enough so that you got a full-blown case of the disease, but enough so that your immune system would engage it, and engaging it build up the defenses and store the defenses should the disease proper ever enter your system. And that's what the study of darkness has done for me. And this has nothing to do with being cold. I'm the opposite of cold. Sometimes I think I'm too soft, right? I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like to see people be put in a bad way. That's why I helped my brother-in-law, although he's got to pay me all that back, which is like a king's ransom for him. It'll take 6 months for him to work off this $1,500 debt. But that's the way it has to be, because without consequence to action, people do not grow. It's a very important thing to understand. That's another teaching that the darkness gives you. The darkness teaches you that everything happens for a reason. Oh, please help me. My daughter is demonically possessed. Well, what did she do to invite that? Okay. This is a causative thing, and this is the biggest lie that the Catholics give about possession. I remember the words of Malachi Martin, the now infamous 20th century defrocked Jesuit. Finished his life in New York City, but he was the most prolific exorcist of the 20th century. Did over 1,000 exorcisms. Exorcisms are they're very serious things. I mean, if you're not spiritually prepared for an exorcism, you can have 8 to 10 years taken off your life. Okay? And why would the Creator sow that into the system? Well, look, there's a reason a person gets autoimmune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. There's a reason somebody gets that. At least, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, there's a reason. You're either sharing needles or you're getting it through the way you practice intimacy through the body. It's not a mystery. There really aren't that many mysteries. We pretend there are, because it keeps the horror franchises going, keeps that Blumhouse production company making movies, doesn't it? Insidious. But there really are no mysteries, and there's no mysteries for me why everything is collapsing now. I've intuitively known it my whole life. It's why my old man and I went at each other like alley dogs fighting at the Christmas dinner table over free trade. I knew it was full of shit. I knew it was the beginning of the disintegration of our country, right? But there's always this endless line of people willing to take the money and not ask any questions. Everybody is looking for, Dr. Evil, the head of the cabal, the head of the snake. Where's the devil in a tuxedo? Where are the demons in coattails? Where is this evil coming from? The agents of this dimension of our spiritual reality, and it's a dimension of our spiritual reality given life and sustenance by the Creator, so it cannot be disrespected. The agents of this sphere of spirituality don't actually practice evil themselves. They influence humans to do the evil. So this is a core concept of the Talamanca Review. I don't think any other podcaster out there is articulating this the way I do, or even close for that matter, if I can take a moment and show myself some respect. And it's important to respect yourself. There's some things I've captured that are really important for people to understand. And in this particular instance, I'm referring to my theory of agency. Okay? So these negative spirits, and the negative extraterrestrials, they're not directly operating on the world. There may be a little bit of it now because things are really coming to a head. Some of the stuff you see in the night sky is UFO warfare, whether you can believe that or not. It's irrelevant to me whether you believe it or not. It's extraterrestrial warfare. You can literally... There was a guy a number of years ago who figured out a way to film the night sky through some form of night vision lens or something like that. Please don't take me to task on the technical details. But he had figured out a way to film the night sky through a lens or a filter that illuminated things, and there's just all these things buzzing around in the sky attacking each other. Some of you probably know who I'm referring to. I forget his name. A lot of people think this is nonsense, Even some of my friends and people I've cooperated with in the alternative media space, they think it's all a psyop. Part of it is, So that brings me to one of the second major breakthroughs or clarifications that the Talamanca Review gives, and that is the law of proportion. Look for the proportionate analysis of what's going on. We as human beings have the tendency to look for these absolute answers. Oh yeah, Wernher von Braun talked about the alien invasion being the last thing, Project Bluebeam. It's all a psyop. Well, I would just take the time to remind you that nowhere in what Wernher von Braun said did he indicate that this was going to be done by human beings. Right? Like many of these very evolved psychic, magical, wizardly type people, and that's what they are. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a part of the human experience. That's part of the human expression. Magi and wizards have always been here. We call them scientists for the most part now, but really, in classical terminology, even going into the antiquity of the unrecognized ages, like Atlantis and other ages even older than Atlantis, in the Galactic Historian, we dealt with a timeline of 55 million years on this planet. And all of that time on this planet having sentient life, life that stood on two legs, had the same five senses we had, the same five appendages, or in some instances, variations of us. The Lemurians were very different physiologically. There was a much more crystal in the construction, the evolution of their physical forms. They were able to incorporate crystal quite a bit more. Life can take place in very many forms. Sentience can occupy very many forms. It's, we just think that, because we've been entrained by science to believe in evolution, that there's this, millions of years where we go from monkeys to men, and it's just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense, okay? And so let's just go over those two things again, because those are two things I stumbled upon on this walkabout that are worth highlighting. So everything that's done here on this physical plane is done through human beings. So if we can be puppeted by forces, because there's a lot of consciousness interaction that is not anywhere close to occupation or possession in the spiritual sense. And yet these agents and these influencers and these hidden and invisible powers and principalities and extraterrestrials, they work through our thoughts. This is why I cannot advocate meditation enough. It's different than prayer. Prayer is asking for something. Meditation is the study of your inner world, your thought processes, your feeling processes, your reactions. And then when you get those things handled and controlled and settled down, then you start to go on visionary journeys. And you start to jump around in time. You start to see the future, or the ancient past, or other planets. All of these things I've seen in meditation. And while you're on path, if your goal is self-realization, which is synonymous with God realization, because we're a fractal of the divine energy is within us, and when we realize it, we are as God. Doesn't mean we become gods in the blasphemous sense, but we are as God. Our perception, our consciousness is as God, or as much of God that can be expressed through a human body. So everything here happens through human agency. That's a very interesting thing to what was the second one? Oh, the law of proportion. It's never an absolute. Oh, extraterrestrials are a psyop. Well, that's a perceptual and an analytical cop-out. That's just taking the easy route. Or going too far into the extraterrestrial thing. Oh, it's all extraterrestrials. That's this tendency in the human mind to search for absolutes. But the only absolute is this moment. Everything else is degrees and proportions. Now, this law of influence, which is a spiritual principle by which human beings are directly affected, and the weaker you are, the more susceptible you are. And weakness is defined by the absence of self, the absence of self-understanding. And that's why they find all these clever people who can do the memorization, the sequencing, memorize their speeches, learn or be trained how to go to world events and stand on the stage with world leaders. But I promise you, these people are vacant. if you were to end up in a room alone with them and ask them some difficult questions about how the world operates, without their advisors and handlers around them, they're morons. Emmanuel Macron is a moron. Justin Trudeau is a moron. Joe Biden was a moron. They're all morons. And I'm not trying to fall victim to my own trap of speaking in absolutes. But in this particular instance, it's true. The utility of these people is the access that the invisible entities have to them. They're, for lack of a better term, organic portals. And they're trained to be organic portals. Okay? You know, it never ceases to amaze me how people get everything so confused. You know, I guess this connects to last night or 2 nights ago, the podcast, Holy Sites Are Nonsense. You know, people will actually go on quests to find portals. Okay? They'll go on a quest to find a portal. It happens all the time, every generation for ever since this occultism started in the 1600s when the Hebraic magic seeped out into Europe. Now, something I want to say. I've never said this, or I've never had need to, because the focus has always been on the West for me, because I'm of the West, despite having lived in the Far East for 2 years. One of the friends I went over there with, a fellow I graduated from university with, we went through the same program, friend of mine, Sid Mills, he's still there. He's been in Taiwan since 1992. He's been there 33 years now. He's married, he's got kids. It's like he made his life there. Very interesting. I came home because I thought I had a book deal. And that's why I came home. But I'm a man of the West. But, when I speak about what's going on in the West, there's something that I leave untouched. And maybe it's time I dealt with this in some small measure. There are very powerful and ancient secret societies in Asia as well. This is why I think Asia is the new balancing act for the world. And make no mistake about it, if you're on or about the same age as me, give or take 15 years older or 15 years younger, so 45 or 72 or 73, you're in the same ballpark as me. The world is better when there's an oppositional force. A unipolar world, I don't know how that would work. We would have to exist and operate and function at an entirely new state of consciousness for that to work. Because the principle of formation and continuity for all of the reality we swim within when we're incarnate is predicated on the dynamic tension between and the magnetic tension, creating spin, magnetic tension between negative and positive poles circling around a center point. All right? Now, by the way, this is how I knew flat Earth was horseshit. The moment I heard it, I went, that's horseshit. Because if you buy into flat Earth, literally everything is wrong. Everything. Okay? The structure of a molecule and an atom, because remember, God builds in fractals. The reality we live in is really not that complicated. They have not discovered anything in modern science that was not discovered by pure contemplatives thousands of years ago and documented. And the contemplatives have gone beyond even the quantum entanglement and the theoretical physics, which, gives us a pornographic understanding, an observer's understanding of the phenomenon or mechanisms of reality, but not a participatory one, and you want the participatory one, because we're human beings. We're created to participate in life, not to observe it. Okay? So, you need a special constitution um, to deal with the negative stuff. But the more you deal with it, the more you become inoculated, and the more you become resilient to it. And, I don't want to sound like a downer. I don't want to, lower the mood of your party. I don't want to cut into your jive. I don't want to become disharmonious with your beats. I don't know how many more ways I can say the same thing, but you have to address the darkness. And it's not just to come to a comprehension of it so you're a better participant in the process of existing in a democratic society, which appears to be on the way out. It's not just for that. It's about spiritual survival now. You have to understand the darkness. Bob said to me one time that human beings come to the human form and the human experience to literally get stamped or tattooed with darkness. This is one of the planets you come to get the darkness tattoo, because darkness is an important spiritual lesson, and not all planets teach it. That's pretty freaky, right? And again, it doesn't mean that you become dark. It means that you come to understand darkness as a component or as something within fraternity with light. You see, it's a coexistence. In the law of opposites, one can't exist without the other, or one is rendered meaningless without the other. Right? We appreciate light because we know what darkness is. We live in half darkness and half light, 12 months a year. And that's nowhere more acute and exemplified than when you're close to the equator, like I am. So, agency and proportion. So, the most important task a human being has is to become more aware. The process of being human is converting consciousness to awareness. Okay? A human being is a sea of awareness in an ocean of consciousness, and you want the sea to grow out and grow out and grow out into the whole ocean. You don't want to just stay in what we'll call the sea, right? You want your awareness to grow out into consciousness and to transform consciousness into perceptual nodal points in the tapestry of your understanding. It's a spiritual art, and it's well worth your time. There's no power in it. There's no money in it. It's not a profession, although a lot of people have turned it into a profession, and that most of them are not spiritual people. They're either completely corrupt religious figures or completely venal and corrupt New Age figures. One should never live off of spiritual instruction. That may be the one of the most serious sins in the world, actually. And if you understand that statement, if you intuitively understand what I just said, without my offering any more explanation than what I've given, you're well on your way to understanding what's wrong with this world. If we can't even exchange wisdom and insight with each other without commodifying it, without demanding we be paid for it, what hope is there for us? Now, that's a very interesting insight right there. You know, everybody's got these theories for why the West is failing. Well, how about nobody wants to work anymore? You know, have you folks been following the return of the Tate brothers to the United States? Their legal ordeal in Romania is over and they've come to the United States. And they're doing all the big podcasts now, like Patrick Bet David and things like that. And, you know, they run something, I don't know, it's like a hustler's university or something. They teach people how to make money. And look, don't get me wrong, like money's important. But when you create a society that idolizes and elevates people who just make money without offering any real value to society, they're not heroes. Okay? They're not heroes. You know, and these guys, they all end up getting rich. Like Jordan Peterson's a multimillionaire now. He was a modest university professor, University of Toronto. His salary when he was at the university was, I don't know, maybe 150, 160 Canadian. You know, and taxes are super high in Canada. So given his tax bracket, he was probably taxed at about 45%. So cut it in half right away. That's 80,000 Canadian, which is about 55,000 US. And there's other expenses to being Canadian, licensing fees and harmonized sales tax. Every time you buy a consumer good, it's another 13% on the harm. Canada is the most excessively taxed country in the world. Number 2 is Australia. These are facts. I'm not talking off the top of my head. Canada is the most taxed country in the world. Also one of the richest resource-wise. How do you explain that? How is it Libya could under Gaddafi, could put everybody through university and send you abroad to do graduate work if you got accepted into a good foreign university? Gaddafi and the Libyan government would pay for your room and board and your tuition to go and study abroad if you came back with that education to help Libya. You know, there was a baby bonus for everybody who had children. Houses were kept at a reasonable price. This was a society run for people. They called the guy a dictator, and Hillary Clinton made sure he got brutally murdered. Right? And then you have Canada, one of the richest countries in the world in terms of resources. You know, in all of this dialogue about Canada becoming the 51st state, it has slipped out that Canada has, in today's dollars, about 17 trillion in resources. We have a population of 40 million, and the last 10 million just came in the last decade. It was 30 million 10, 15 years ago. Okay? You know, when I lived in Taiwan in 92 to 94, Canada and Taiwan had the same population. It was like 23, 24 million people 30 years ago, not big populations at all. The curious thing is Taiwan is still at 23 million people and Canada has doubled. Very curious. This is a good walkabout. I'm enjoying this. I like the walkabouts. Let's go over another concept that I think is integral to my work and the research and the insights I've had contemplatively, meditatively, and the people I've met who have confirmed my findings. The alien invasion is not ships. It's not going to be ships landing on the White House or in Moscow in Red Square. That may come later on in the 21st century, but it's all consciousness now, right? Have you noticed how busy they keep us now? In a constant state. I'd say that North Americans are adrenalized all the time now. You know, adrenalized, and when they're done work, everybody dopes up. That's the big thing in Canada. Everybody's high in Canada. Like everybody. It has the highest per capita pot usage in the world. It's all free. It's all legal. Very reasonable. Now, why at this juncture in history? And this all came in under Trudeau. There was no way Harper, the Zionist, chosen people, Christian lunatic. And yeah, we have those people in Canada too, by the way, Christian Zionists. And the Prime Minister, we can't get a good leader in Canada. Well, nobody can anymore, because it's come down to two decisions, communist or Zionist. And those are the bookends of the Jewish world, by the way. So if you don't think we're living, at least in the West, and the East is influenced by this as well, but primarily in the West, we are living in an entirely Judaic reality. And there's nothing wrong or conspiratorial about that. Remember, they are the foundation of the religious teachings of the West and the Middle East. 28 major prophets, 26 controlled by the rabbis, one controlled by the Christians, and the others referenced to give greater credit to the one that Christians follow. One prophet within a 28 system lineage, all Palladian inspired, by the way. Again, there's your extraterrestrial narrative. And then you've got the final one, which in a very unique way goes back and attempts to reclaim and Islamify all of the prophets and sort of usurp them from the control of the rabbis. But that's neither here nor there. That's just religious argumentation. By the way, that goes on everywhere. Do you know in the near past, like in the last 5 or 6 centuries, do you know that differing schools, before the expulsion from Tibet, do you know that differing schools of Buddhism and of Tibetan Buddhism physically warred with each other in the past? War is the most contagious thing on this dimension. Violence is the most contagious thing in the human experience. I mean, when even the Tibetan Buddhists can't avoid it, you know something's going on. So that's why it's a Jewish world. Because we're cycling out of a cultural consciousness container. Now, there's a lot of people out there who think they've already cycled out of it. But if you're an atheist, you haven't cycled out, you've opted out. Because atheism is the stupidest position on the planet. This is an intelligent and alive and multidimensional existence with sentient life in every dimension, in every corner, in our thoughts, in the air, in the earth, in fire. Life, there's life everywhere here. There's life in plasma-based life forms in space. There's life everywhere. Life is the norm, not the exception. And this stupid human race sits here feeling lonely. Oh, we're all alone in the universe. Well, how hard have you looked, moron? I shouldn't be so hard on people, but look, if you're going to say something in public and it's patently wrong, and you say it with force because you live in a patently ignorant society, guess what? Your face just went up on the Bruce McDonald dartboard. And I throw bullseyes, so you're going to get it right between the eyes. And you deserve it, because you're talking in a public space and you're an idiot. Okay? And this goes for all of them. Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, all of these atheists. Fucking idiots. Now, if they categorically reject the notion of the biblical God, whether it be defined as Hashem, Yahweh, or Allah, okay, but even when you study Islam, and I have, remember, I've studied Islam, their concept of God it is actually one of the most accurate definitions of God I've ever come up with. It's God is everywhere in all time space. It's basically the same definition of God that I have, but I don't believe you can name it. And by the way, neither did the Kabbalists. The first thing, when I was doing the Martinist material, there was one of the libers, for those of you who go back that far with me, there was one of the libers that talked about the names of God. And the first thing they say, this is from the Kabbalah. And the first thing they say is, the true God has no name and is almost completely unapproachable by human beings. And so right away, they're telling you, well, you're dealing with a subordinate of the Creator, a manifested being, but not the real Creator. And they tell you the Creator is beyond our worship. It's incredibly cynical if you understand religion the way I do, and patently wrong. The Creator is not beyond our worship. And the worship of the Creator is participatory. And it's generally done in the contemplative arts. It's not a prayer-based. Okay? Well, this is going so well tonight, I think I'm going to go a little bit longer. All right, let's circle back to the world. Okay? Let's circle back. Now, here's this guy, Bruce, on the Talamanca Review saying that there's a creator, there's divine law, there's all of these things, and yet people wake up and they live in a world where there doesn't seem to be any deference to these divine laws. Plans are hatched at global and national levels to literally exterminate their own citizens. Where's God? By the way, that was the question that a lot of the survivors of the concentration camp had as well. Where was God? It was a tremendous existential crisis for the Jews. Now, the internment of the Jews is real. And I think a lot of the horrible stuff is real. I think the experiments on twins by Joseph Mengele is real. But I don't think that the core story is true, and I don't think the numbers we're given are anywhere near accurate. I think it's probably what the Red Cross and the Vatican said, which is 272,000 people died in the concentration camps, gypsies, homosexuals, and Jewish people, and they largely died of disease due to malnutrition, after the Allied embargo began. Okay? But nonetheless, the internment of the European Jews happened. And now you understand, and like, it has to be said that this was, I don't know enough about the history of Eastern Europe to understand why the hatred of Jews is so fierce there. But very little convincing was needed for Romania, Poland, Hungary, other countries to begin setting up these camps. It was almost like a pleasant side effect of the war for a lot of the people. Okay? And if you're Jewish, And you have to feel that. Even though the 6 million number is categorically false, the fact that it even happened is, I think, cautionary enough for me that what could bring such contempt for these people, that, is it just religious enmity? Is it? I don't know. Very interesting question. Many people much smarter than me have tried to answer it. If you prick us, do we not bleed? The incredible soliloquy of Shylock in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. And the Venetian bankers preceded the Bank of England, but the Bank of England was the first fully Jewish-run bank. And that's why it begins the present cycle we're in now. I don't know why anybody would want to run the world. I mean, if you offered me the position of leadership over even two or 3,000 people in a small village in Costa Rica, I'd probably have to think about it for like a month. Do I really want to do this? Leadership is a very difficult thing, and kings are habitually killed. We do it in effigy now through elections. Everything is all the old rituals are still here now. They're just done in effigy. They're not done literally anymore. We don't kill the kings anymore. But that used to be the normal practice. Because when a group of people, a kingdom or a tribe, invested in someone and that person failed, they were perceived to be corrupt because they were supposed to be able to make the land work. They were supposed to be able to make the weather work. They were in charge. And if those things didn't work, it was like, okay, you lied to us. Children died. Elderly people died because we didn't have enough nutrition to get through the winter because you lied to us. So we're going to build this wicker man and we're going to burn you in it. Right? And we still do it in effigy. We're doing it right now in Canada with Justin Trudeau. He's getting the wicker man treatment now. Oh, that departure of his was just complete nonsense. Right? And this new goof, Carney, holy cow, he's worse than Trudeau. Worse, by far. Right? There's no way out of this situation. They're intent on depopulation. And make no mistake about it, that's what this is. So, look, to go back to my earlier question, Bruce, how can you be so optimistic about the existence of a creator and the existence of divine law when all of these horrible things happen in the world? Well, look, this is a free will space. People can do whatever they want, but they own it and they have to pay the price. Okay? In their next life, in between the death of this life and the next incarnation, in between the lives, they have to pay for it. Right? It's just very interesting how the whole thing works. Nobody really gets away with anything. But to see that, you have to come to a certain state of consciousness. You have to be looking at people and you have to see things in them and make connections with like 500, 700 years ago and go, hey, that's them. That's that ideology born again. But in this incarnation, their situation is much worse. They're paying a heavy cost. And so, I mean, why would anyone want leadership? Why would anyone want power? Okay, well, I don't know why anybody would want those things and increase their karmic risk. Right? No, there's benign leaders. By the way, there is an absolutely fantastic 4-hour podcast that just dropped about a week ago with it's Lex Friedman talking through a translator with Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India. And let me tell you, Modi is one interesting human being. There's things I did not know about him He's an avid faster. He 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 fasts as many days in a week as he eats, and when he's not fasting, he only eats one meal a day. He spent 2 years in the Himalayan mountains living with yogis before he entered into. The yogis told him, they said, your karma in this life is leadership. Go back into society. We'll teach you some stuff for a couple years, but you're not meant to stay here. Isn't that interesting? And even the yogis told him, you're going to be able to do much more in New Delhi. Okay? But a very peaceful and harmonious man, Modi. And a very fascinating culture, India. Very, very fascinating. Dirty, but fascinating. So I guess that's where faith comes in. You know, until you have some clarity and some perception, you're going to have to rely on faith, and it's like they say in Buddha, you live the eightfold dharma path. You take refuge in the eight principles of Buddhism until you're enlightened, and it's a code you have to live by. And it's just standard stuff, fairly strict, you know. There's some other stuff that just pops into my head, and when I'm doing a walkabout, if it pops in, I'm supposed to talk about it. Um, Look, I'm just going to say this plain and simple. You can't get any spiritual benefit from a channeler or any psychic phenomenon that is transmitting information to you. For some reason, both on my Facebook and my YouTube, I keep getting these short 30, 60-second clips of Bashar. And I'm asking myself, like in one of them, somebody asks him what the Ten Commandments were. He goes, well, what you call the Ten Commandments were, first of all, they were not on stone. It was a partly nanotechnology tablet whereby when you touched it, you would get a download of information. And to give you an example of what I mean, and I'm going, what is the spiritual benefit of that? How could you be some ancient entity channeling through this guy and speaking to human beings if you're that smart like this ancient entity and actually believe you're helping people? Okay? I mean, does Bashar give any spiritual instructions? Do they differ from what we've been told in our traditional spiritual teachings? Silence, fasting, meditation, mantra, tonal prayer, the cookbook for spiritual unfoldment. Has anything changed? Do you not have to do the work anymore because you went and listened to a 1 hour presentation by this guy named Darryl Anka who channels Bashar? Is that you don't have to meditate anymore? You don't have to repent. You don't have to do anything because you went to listen to Bashar? It's all nonsense, folks. And I'm not saying you don't get interesting information. Like it's interesting, you know, when he talks about the 10. Yeah. I get why people get it, but that is not spiritual practice. Spending $1,500 to get an Akashic record reading is not spiritual practice. It's self-indulgence. Until people circle back and actually start doing the work and living it, we're not going to make any progress. Okay? And I guess, some critical things have to change. We have to change the way we think, you know? Anyways, I think that's enough for tonight. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review, and a walkabout at that. Peace out.